Not from Indiana. Oh, my son-in-law
No, nobody's from Cleveland.
is. My mother-in-law's shirt.
Nobody's from Cleveland.
I just went back
It's
last
kind of like
weekend.
Maine. You gotta marry your sister.
What is he, Wild Thing? He's probably got Jaboo up there behind the tree.
Requires an engineer. Probably the engineer was only broken.
Oh, yeah. Probably was. Trying to avoid that city.
Get around there, it's not bad.
Their engineering politics was a little too tough for me. He had to pay off half the state before
Well,
he
he
could get
could fix it.
For something.
We thought we needed a real engineer to fix it.
Like a real deal one? We don't even put it down personally speaking for me because we were, in fact, in the past, we
Yeah.
could actually send.
And this is Paul Street, so we don't wanna do that. So it's recording as well.
This isn't on, that's why I
This is on?
I'll read this closely, Tony, but I got a different ruling from the Lee County Election Board.
I'm just telling what the AG says.
Let me go check. Let me shut mine off and go start.
Or is it, usually there's another button somewhere that I have to, oh my God. Nothing is for
Click on the camera, the video.
Gotta stop meeting with.
Yes.
You saw that, that I blind copied you in that email?
Yes, thank you.
Did they contact you at all?
Back in the world. We've got no message to that.
Okay.
Sequence. Timer. To the left of the box.
Just some more.
Oh, okay. So now it's on.
Husband passed. Her husband passed away.
Steve, it's almost 3. Are we ready to go?
We are ready to go. We're on.
Ida Baker High School. She was a principal at the middle school.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 3 p.m. Thursday, November 3rd, 2016. Time for the meeting of the Gateway Services Community Development District Board of Supervisors. We have a quorum. Would you please stand and join us to pledge our flag and country? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. If you have a noise-making machine like this, please put it on mute for the balance of the meeting. If you wish to speak to the board, there are forms near the door which should be given to the manager. Mr. Manager, do we have folks who would like to speak to the board this afternoon?
Yes, we do. We have 3. First up is Kathleen Flaherty, bike trail and walkway.
Kathleen Flaherty, 12566 Ivory Stone Loop. I know we just recently had the bike trail and walkway redone. However, if you take a chance to walk down it, you will find that it's all cracked. There are roots from trees that are coming through it. So it is kind of dangerous for people riding their bikes and walking.
Which walkway?
The one on Gateway.
The one on Gateway?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
talking about
That's
gateways.
what-
I'm sorry.
that's
Yeah.
what I wanted.
Yes. It's at several spots. It's between Stony Brook and Hidden Lakes. It's again after Gateway Greens and down farther. There are several spots that are where the roots are coming out and they are cracked.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Ed Tinkle. He has 3 topics: the water meter invoice, report line, CDD street lighting report, and organizational plan.
Yeah, the organizational plan, I'd like to hold on that later if there's a presentation made. And in replacement up front, based upon what Kathleen just said, question about what I thought was a linear park. Is the FPL easement and the path that's on that, is that considered a part of Gateway CDD's linear park? Or is that not a park? I always thought it was a public park for Gateway people to use all the way up at least to the swimming pool, because there's an access to it to the back of Pinecrest, Doug, where you used to live. What's the status of that? Is it closed for public consumption or public use?
As far as
I have no idea.
As far, my understanding was it was between the pool and Griffin Drive was the linear park, but it didn't extend beyond that.
Well, my question is going to be is, why is it gated?
Why is it what?
Why is it
Sorry.
gated? Why is there a gate blocking it?
I don't know, maybe that's the one Kathleen's been talking about.
I don't know. I've been asked that question. There's a
April
gate
will-
across it, and I don't
April wants
understand
to
why.
Speak to that, please, Ed.
I'm sorry? April, okay.
April wants to speak to that.
It's to my understanding that we don't have any jurisdiction out on that property. That's, the way I understand it is we have the ability to utilize it. The path, I'm not under the impression that it was put there specifically for the residents. But we do have access to it, and we do have walkers out there, but we get a lot of complaints that there's vehicles accessing the easement. We did request that WCI put up gates on the intermediate roads in between the FPNL easement. And also, there once was a chain across the access on Gateway Boulevard. And because vehicles have been accessing the easement, and several people have called in and complained about that because there's recreational vehicles and perhaps other vehicles behind homes, we went down and actually secured that gate again. We coordinated with FPNL to make sure that it was locked appropriately. As soon as we did it, someone cut the FPNL lock. I'm not sure what that was about, whether it was one of their subs, because I know they've been active out there working on the easement. But I'd have to check with staff to see if that has been corrected, but it was our intention of securing that pathway so vehicles couldn't access. However, one of the things that I did notice when I went out and inspected it is we want to try to at least keep the bushes trimmed around the barrier there, so walkers can actually access the path. So it's 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. Do you run the chain across and try to prevent vehicles from getting in there? It also creates an obstacle for the walkers and the bicycles. And
I know that area has been referred to in the past as a linear park, and I think it was part of WCI's master plan.
David?
Maybe, I don't know, David, if you...
Not to pick on you, David, but
do you know...
anybody knows anything about it?
David, do you know if the area, the FPNL easement in between Griffin and, I guess it really goes to Hampton Park, if that was designated as a linear park? Because I've heard it referenced as a linear park
Sorry about that.
before.
Digging holes for me.
The answer is yes or no.
Dave Caldwell with WCI. Yes, I believe you are correct, Mr. Banks, that under the DRI PUD approval, that was to be a linear park for the community. And WCI owns the real property today. Actually, years ago, we tried and attempted to convey it to the district, and I can't really recall the circumstances that we withdrew it, but nevertheless, it was withdrawn. Sometime probably in 2017, we may be presenting the package for the conveyance to the district again. As to the gates, it's as April points out, we've had difficulties controlling vehicles using that asphalt path. It causes no end of concern to residents who live back there. So gates were put up, but it's supposed to be open to pedestrians, bikes, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But closed to motor vehicles.
Yes, closed to motor vehicles.
So is there an easy, I'm asking this as an honest question, is there no easy way that a person on a bike can simply negotiate around that gate?
your gates do. The one on Gateway Boulevard does not.
Oh.
And I had asked if WCI was going to build that same kind of gate down there, but they were not. So we reinstalled the chain.
Yeah. I thought at the south end there was a pedestrian access, but I guess if there's not, you're saying there's not. Oh.
Wait a while, one person just said to me there is no gate. Now, is there or isn't there a gate?
No, there are multiple points where roads, in Hampton Park, a road cuts right through it, and there are gates there, but I think that has pedestrian access. I think up at the north end at Gateway Boulevard, I think there's another either chain or gate, but you can get in as a pedestrian. I think it's at the south side at Griffin that maybe is totally blocked off.
All right, so in other words, pedestrians and bikers can access it, which is safe.
Well, certainly that's the intent, you know,
Yeah,
but
okay.
we may have a
So
a
what's the
mechanical
problem?
problem right up now.
No motorized vehicles.
No, well, we don't want motorized vehicles out there except for the, you know, the right kind of vehicles like FP&L or district or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
There you go.
Thank you. Next item I had was you've gotten or received a pay estimate, I believe, and possibly two, from Florida Line on the water meter project, one of which I believe is asking for a retention or release of retainage. I'm here to ask that you do not release that, but you have a time limit, and Tony will have to advise you on that, you have to make a decision on that, which means that my past experience has been that unless you have a justification for holding that money, you have to release it. And at this point in time, or your justification would be coming up with all the claims and damages that would be associated with this project, which could be a sundry of things: legal fees, engineering fees, staff fees. I'm just asking that that get done and we don't get behind the 8 ball, because I think a clock is ticking on you right now, and I believe it's 20 days. And I just ask that don't release that money.
For clarification, for the record, the 20 days, it's 20 business days, and based upon the date it was received, the district has until November 23rd in order to respond as to whether or not it believes that request is a proper invoice and/or whether or not it's appropriate to be paid. So the staff has had initial conversations about that, and we will make a recommendation to the board. It's anticipated, unless you're different from Tyler or Chris or April, at the November 17th board meeting. That's the concept right now.
Okay.
So is there are there already items that are on a list that you've been accumulating to some list at this point in time? I would hope.
You have what I gave you a month ago at that report that itemized the items that I believe, talking to staff and talking to others,
So-
that justify the cost. Whether or not that's been done internally, I don't know. I hope it has.
That's the next question. Has this been done internally?
Once again, we have all the information, and we make a recommendation to the board at the November 17th meeting as to how
So
to handle
you
that.
are internally?
Reviewing everything, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item I have is,
Ed,
I'm sorry.
1 second, please. Is there any likelihood that you're gonna recommend release?
I would not want to indicate one way or another at this time.
Yeah.
Well, I understand, but my next question is, if you recommend release, and if we agree to your recommendation, that money's gone.
But the first determination and recommendation by staff is whether or not that statement is a proper invoice under the contract and under the Prompt Payment Act. That's sort of a threshold question. And then the second one, assuming for sake of discussion that it's a defined term, proper invoice, what recommendation would be as to making payment. And there are a number of factors that I believe staff will take into account in making that recommendation to the board.
Well,
I certainly would like to have, and I realize the dates on the election, because our seat doesn't become available until, I believe, the 22nd. I would hate for a decision to be made to the contrary at that 17th meeting. I would be immensely disappointed.
Well, I think that would interfere with the 20 days, business days. I would think that we would need
Yes.
to get a recommendation prior to that,
20th.
to the 17th.
No, the 20th was the cutoff date.
The 20 business days will be the 23rd
The 20 business days will be the 23rd?
of November, because I'm
So-
excluding weekends and holidays,
So
November 11th from that
we're-
calculation.
So as long as on the 17th, with the recommendation that comes through, action either 2 or 4, as long as we've got everything packaged and ready to go, so if we make that decision, we can proceed without any delay, because if there's, you're only talking about a couple days. So if there's
Right.
additional research or anything like that, we need that recommendation packaged, whether 2 or 4, without any additional work that needs to be done.
And one other aspect of it, assuming for sake of discussion that there's a determination made by staff that the invoice is not a proper invoice, then we have until that period of time to make that determination and kick it back to the vendor to submit a proper invoice without making any determination as to the substantive aspect per se.
Correct. Now, and that has to be done in writing.
Correct.
Okay, so the clock would start again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Last item I have is at the last meeting, you made a statement about the district lights. I did a quick report for everybody's review.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. But I think it does behoove that we've indicated to staffs that this is something of high priority to be absolutely completed by the 17th.
Yeah, we need to.
I would agree with that. April, do you have any thing to say about that? Do you have any difficulty with that?
No, other than we have conferenced and we have a plan of action for the invoice.
Thank you. What do
We
you,
don't-
what are you gonna talk to us about lights now?
Yeah, that answered that. Just wait and see what happens. You'd asked at the last meeting, or we talked about the issue up on Griffin Drive, and the issue of doing any more lighting discussions was tabled until the board had more information as to what's going on. I'm not saying that this is going to answer all your questions. In fact, it might raise some questions. But this is what I've been able to find regarding this subject. Right now, your street lightings divides into two categories: those that are owned by the CDD, maintained by the CDD, and energized by FPL. That's about 290 lights. I'm missing one. I can't find that dude. I've driven. It's around here somewhere, but I can't find the thing. But I'm going to say one out of 290 is pretty good. Those 290 lights are a separate billing from FPL to you all, and we'll go over that in a minute. The second component of your lighting is Stony Brook, and Stony Brook's lights are under a lease arrangement with the CDD, with FPL. Those lights are owned, operated, maintained, and energized by FPL. So you all really don't have anything in that. You receive a copy of an invoice, and I believe April and her staff passes that on down, and it's billed to the 004 account to Stony Brook. You also have 42 other lights which do not fall into the category of street lights, but those would be your Commons Park, the soccer park, and the soccer field lights themselves, 42 of those. Bill Knight wrote a report back in 2010 for the board basically about your lights. And he indicated in that report that all luminaries have a life expectancy or useful life of about 30 years. Well, I would say the majority of those 290 lights that you have out there have either already broached the 30 years or they're getting awful close to it because they're on the drives that have been here since basically 1986. There is no evidence that we have ever done any type of a field assessment of the lights. Now, it may be on a as-need basis when a light's either obviously gets hit by a car and it gets knocked over or something like that, to where a light goes out, they have to go up and maintain it. But a general overview or assessment for the basement of replacement or refurbishment has not been done, and I would recommend that we need to do that. And at the same time, a cost analysis on the basis of possibly converting to LED.
Can I just ask an interim question before this goes too far away? When that report was made regarding a 30-year life, is that 30-year life not the structure of the pole, or is it the structure of the pole, or is it in fact the illumination assembly?
The report the bill did was not definitive on that,
All right,
but
well,
I would
in
say
your expertise,
I would say it was the structure and the light, what we call the box.
Correct.
Where the light's at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those poles, I would think that they would have, being reinforced concrete, I think they would have a lot longer life than that.
Okay.
Street lighting costs, this was interesting. The one bill, I'm not really going to get into it other than the fact that's the Stony Brook bill of account 44051. They pay about $2,700 a month for their energy. That's on their 004 account. It is what it is. It's a lease. Not much you can do about it. But I did find out something interesting on the one we're paying. They're hitting us for 290 lights, one of which is FPL owned, and I found it. It's this one right out here in the park. As you come into the office here, there's a park on a pole with the good old FPL standard that looks like Veronica Shoemaker, those lights that stick out. That's the sole FPL light that you all have in your billing deal. Took a while to find that dude. But anyway, the interesting part on this, I don't have any problem with their energy consumption, the $1.13 for the 41 kilowatt, the $1.65 and the 320. Those are what they are. The ones that are interesting is that two titles, UNCP, UCUP. I had no idea what those were. So I called the district engineer here. He didn't know what they were. So I got a hold of headquarters of FPL and had to go way up the ladder to find out what they were, and they sent me an email. UCNP translates to conductors not under pavement, 3.7 cents per foot per month. UCUP translates to conductor under pavement, 905 cents per foot per month. If we own those lines, why are we paying a maintenance fee for them? As I understand it, we've been maintaining them since day one. The only thing I can figure is that when old WCI created Gateway, there may have been some type of a lease agreement that had that payment clause in it. And then when we took them over, whenever we took them over, somebody forgot to take it off the billing. But this is about $1,000 a month on your bill, and I don't understand why we're paying it. If we're maintaining the lines, as I understand we are, then why are we paying them a maintenance fee? And it's a lot of money. I mean, a heck of a lot of money. It's being checked right now by FPL, but I didn't know if anybody knew about this.
Bill, may I?
Please.
When was the last time that we've ever maintained a line or repaired or replaced?
You have Bentley Electric, you'd have to ask Terry and staff on that one. I don't have a clue.
Replaceable?
No, a line.
No, a line.
Line, L-I-N-E, not light.
I mean, this may be a moot point. I'm not saying it is.
I don't know.
but
I don't know.
It may be that we have never replaced the line in 30 years. Having said that.
Replaced or
the
maintained.
The idea that we're maintaining them becomes a non-item. And how is it that we know that the agreement is that we're responsible to maintain the line?
That's what FPL's checking right now. A guy named Linton Lilly in Miami is trying to find out what that agreement. My point is that if we are indeed have some agreement that's been predetermined that has that, then we certainly shouldn't have to be incurring any expense to do it. We'll call them if we have a problem. But we just found this.
Need to first determine if we're actually responsible.
Yeah. Don't you think we ought to ask David Caldwell to answer all those questions?
Absolutely.
I'm
pitching that way.
You want to ask me?
Please.
I didn't know this was going to be a challenge here.
Are there any other things you
I'm
want
done.
to ask that we briefed on before you?
I didn't know you were coming.
Dave Caldwell, WCI. Old history is the cobwebs come off or whatever. I think Ed is touched on something that I recall when we contracted with FP&L at the time. What they offered was their standard mix of rental poles that we didn't like, and we wanted something upgraded. And what we did at the time was negotiate with them. They do everything with the exception of the pole that would be provided by the developer. So I think that's why you're charged for the underground cable. They put it in, they maintain it, or they should maintain it. So if there's a break, you call them up, they'd fix it. Whether that's been followed over the last 30 years, who knows? But I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think you have a high maintenance on that end. It's on your light fixtures that get hit by lightning or whatever. But I think Ed's correct, and that when he hears back from FP&L, I think they will say, oh yeah, we put that in, and that's why we charge you.
There you go.
Any more questions for Dave?
I'm sure we'll think of something.
David, thank you.
I'm here.
I'm done. You're done. All right. Mr. Manager?
Yes, actually, David Caldwell from WC. He had a comment on Agenda 6A, so I don't know if he wanted to cover it now or he wanted to wait for the agenda item to come up.
And I'm happy to come and stay for the 6A when it comes up. I realize we have to put in the thing now. I've read the engineer's report or the recommendation in the agenda package, and I support it, but I did want to clarify some numbers that are in there for the board's edification. So I can do it when the issue comes up, so you don't have to rehash this twice.
If you don't mind, I'd like you to wait until we're.
That's fine. I will.
discussing that
I will.
whole thing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager? is
That's
that
all
it?
we had.
Okay, we have a unique item to discuss before we get to the regular agenda, and I would like for our attorney to enlighten us as to what's going on.
I will try. Briefly, questions have been asked, raised with regards to two aspects. One is there are currently 3 candidates for 2 positions of Board of Supervisors. Mr. Tinkle has indicated he's being unopposed. Ms. Flaherty, Ms. Stanley indicated they're running for the same seat. The election date is November 8th, 2016. The successful person as of that date, per the statute 190.006 subsection 3B, states that the board members shall assume the office on the 2nd Tuesday following their election. So Mr. Tinkle is unopposed, and Ms. Stanley or Ms. Flaherty, whoever the successful supervisor is in that election, will take office on November 22nd, 2016. That's when they assume office as a member of the Board of Supervisors. Secondly, a question arises as to what communications can take place between an unopposed candidate and incumbent board members or other board members between now and the time they actually assume office. Provided for you an informal opinion from the Florida Attorney General dated August 12, 2016 regarding candidates member-elect in the Sunshine Law, and also attached previous Attorney General's opinion number 98-60 involving the Sunshine Law and unopposed candidate, because 98-60 was referenced in the informal opinion of August 12, 2016. In summary, in Mr. Tinkle's case, the opinion of the Attorney General is, as he is unopposed, he would be considered elected without opposition and elected as of November 8th, 2016, and would be a member-elect of the Board of Supervisors. As to Ms. Stanley and Ms. Flaherty, they will be, whoever the successful candidate is, will become a member-elect as of November 8th, 2016. After that date, the successful candidate, the member-elects, will not be able to have any conversations, and they're subject to the Sunshine Law, with any board members, incumbent board members. They'll be subject to the Sunshine Law just as the other board members are at the present time. And what I will also do, I will always send an email out the day after the election reminding board members of that. That's my routine. I've been doing that since 98-60 came out many, many years ago to all my boards.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. If there are any
Bill,
questions,
there is another election too.
Yes,
Just,
that's so.
there's another election. But I'll certainly take this under advisement, but this is not what I was told by the Lee County Election Board.
And what were you told by the Lee County Election Supervisor?
Until you say I do, you are not a board member subject to the Sunshine Laws.
Once again, this is the Attorney General of the state of Florida. He indicates you as a member-elect, you are subject to the Sunshine Law.
I'll get second legal opinion on that, Tony.
That would be my guidance to all member-elects and to all members of the board.
And I'll get second legal opinion on that.
And
let's go a little deeper into this, if we may. According to my calendar, 2 weeks after November 8th is November 22nd.
That's correct.
We don't have a meeting scheduled until December 1st. You're telling me then, if I understand correctly, that after November 8th, these newly elected members, even though they haven't been sworn into office by you or anyone else, have the same restrictions on them as any other board member? Is that
Yes,
so?
under the Sunshine Law, yes, that's my opinion, and that's the opinion of the Florida Attorney General, yes.
And that and the swearing-in ceremony will then be scheduled for December 1st, our next meeting
22nd.
after the 2 weeks after the election? Is that what you're telling us?
They take office the 22nd, and typically, what will happen is they'll sign the oath of office on the 22nd and submit that to the state of Florida. Is that correct, Stephen? I think that's typically, or Justin? I think it's typically how it's done, so they become a supervisor as of the 22nd by signing the oath and sending it off to the Secretary of State. And then on December 1st, with the new elected supervisors, the board elects its officers, because the statute requires that to take place.
That will be, December 1st will be the first time that the newly elected supervisors will sit at this dais. Is that
That's
so?
correct, unless you decide to have a special meeting after November 22nd.
Anybody have any comments or complaints or anything about that? Certainly is surprising in a way. All right,
That's all I have.
if there's, I'm sorry, sir.
That's all I have, absent any questions that any board members.
Okay, if there's nothing further on that, then we'll go to the regular agenda. Starting with item 3, committee reports, A, B, C, D, and E. Now, in some of these committee reports, at least one, there is a recommendation from the Pelican Reserve Advisory Committee to approve a contract. Is that so, Bob? Would you please, thank you, please come forward.
Bob Geppert from Pelican Preserve, and this is also listed as business item 5A, just so you know, it's the same thing. But the essence of it is we've had Aquagenics providing our pond maintenance for the last almost 6-7 years, so we finally went out for a rebid. We got 7 bids back, 6 or 7 bids back, and the 3 lowest bidders were vetted by Tetra Tech for quality of service, financials, et cetera. And we have selected the low bidder, which makes it kind of easy. At $64,000, we're currently paying about $87,000, and that is with more ponds. So the ponds work group recommended that we go with the low bidder, which is Lake and Wetland Management. We took that to PPAC. PPAC concurred, and now we're presenting it to the board tonight. And assuming that you guys concur also, I've asked April to call Aquagenics and tell them their services are terminated as of December 1st.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, as long as we've heard all of this explanation, may I ask for a motion to approve this recommendation from the Pelican Reserve Advisory Committee? Say again?
I will make the motion.
I have a motion. May
I'll
I have a
second.
second? And I have a second. Is there any questions for Mr. Gilbert?
On
No, you
this
go
issue,
first.
no.
Say again?
On this item, no.
On this item?
No.
On this item, this is item only.
So, but we're using Aquagenics, is that correct, for everything outside of Pelican? Yes?
Yes.
So,
As of right now.
yeah. So my question is, having 2 separate vendors maintain,
No. Pelican Preserve maintains all of its own, by its own, on its own budget. It is not part of the general
so,
aspect of
so
maintenance.
we as a district have no oversight or control over that pond?
Sure we do.
Over the pond?
Yeah, we do.
Through PPAC.
I know, that's
Yeah,
kind of a
through PPAC.
rhetorical
Well, with
question.
the exception of compliance issues.
Correct.
We still have the jurisdiction and the responsibility relative to the compliance.
Yeah, all the contracts come to the district. But the day-to-day management is done by Pelican Reserve residents, the ponds work group. We walk our ponds every month with our supplier. We enforce the contract. We even wrote the language of what we want them to do.
Thank you.
And you've become dissatisfied?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, we're very happy, but with Aquagenics, due diligence said you need to test the marketplace occasionally.
Okay.
So we were 3 years late in testing because we had other things that got our attention. But this year we had the appropriate time, and the contract was in its, I think, 6th year. It was a 3-year contract. So we finally put it out for rebids to test the marketplace, and everyone was lower than Aquagenics.
And Aquagenics didn't have any appetite to match?
Oh, yeah, everybody got the same contract package, and it was a blind
No, what I'm
open.
saying is, did you go back to Aquagenics, say that we've got other vendors that are cheaper than you?
Oh, no.
Would you be willing to match
No.
that?
You can't do that with the bidding process. Everybody sat here, Aquagenics and all the other 5
So-
bidders, and
so
we
the whole
publicly
bidding
read
process,
them.
okay.
So there's
All
no
right.
other, do-overs.
Are you okay to?
Yeah.
We're ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Mr. Manager.
Thank you.
Bob.
Bob, don't leave. I've got some other things I just want to be sure that are in this 3A and et cetera, while Bob's here.
Oh, okay, well, let's run back up to 3A, paragraph 3.
Yeah, what-
A, B, C, D, and
Could we go to
E.
page 7?
And tell me which one you'd like.
Page
please.
7, please. And under item number 5, budget update. I'm just going to try to reiterate, Bob, that these things have in fact been done and make it as a public record. Okay?
Yes.
So in the last paragraph, it talks about general consensus of the committee, if everybody is where I'm at. Still more funds available. Bob Geppert, as a matter of fact, suggested the option, durable material, yada, 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 came and was to be presented to the board for approval. And did that in fact get approved, Bob? Do you remember?
It was approved by PPAC to come
But
here.
Was it approved by the board?
That I do not know. You haven't had a meeting since then, so.
My recollection is that we approved the meeting or 2 ago.
May I ask the infamous Stephen Bloom if he recollects that? I couldn't come up with a solid recollection, and so I was iffy on it.
I believe it was approved, but I'd have to confirm. If I remember
Okay.
this came up.
Yeah,
This
we
is-
had 2 choices, and we went for the
Bob, I'm not
costlier one,
defending-
yeah.
I'm
No,
not
no,
defending
I'm
your
just trying to
choice.
answer.
What I'm saying is if that's, since we have him here right now, could I just simply make a simple motion that that this is approved? Somebody give me a second. Is there any reason why this would offend anybody? In other words, this would clarify all of these items and make sure that it's over and done with, rather than being drug up at a later date.
So you're making a motion to approve the trellis, the exterior pressure treated wood
Yes,
for
I am.
$34,972?
Yes, sir, I am.
I'll second that. Any other questions?
Now, Tony's got his hands up, careful.
Oh, no, I'm just.
You okay?
Oh.
Okay, I got it.
I should not do that even at auctions.
This may be duplicative.
That's
but-
okay. Better to approve it twice than miss it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
5-0.
Then also, if we, no.
Okay,
hold on.
I'm not in a hurry. Kinda like David.
On page 8, agenda item, and it is the Sarah Mabry thing regarding the additional striping at the bridge. And what I wanted to do was to indicate, I'm questioning, did we make a motion to delay? That was my recollection, to
Motion
delay this
was to
until.
table that whole thing.
Until this meeting was done with the city of Fort Myers. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I made that motion.
Substantially correct.
Okay, all right, that's all again, senior citizen here, I'm looking for some whatever. PPAC charter, Ron DePonte sent the charter to Tony Pierce for legal review, spoken stating matrix, post orders, yada, yada, yada. My question that I had was, Tony, what's the status of the review?
I'm substantially finished with it, kind of marking it up, and I'll get it back to Ron shortly.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay, and I had manager's report, item number 7, by the way, is a typo. It says Manger report. Just while I was in there playing around. And the other thing was
Are you back on page 7 or 8?
I was on 8, I apologize. I'm just kind of going further, because I was on 8 with Tony, I'm still on 8 with a typo of item number 7. I'm going to page number 9. And the board did approve the expenditure
We
of
go to 9.
2,000 for the control panel. Did we approve that?
It's our security, yes.
Yes, sir. Not the lighting. I couldn't
Correct.
remember the control panel.
This is the updating of the systems that their access
I'm
control.
not trying to
yes,
be
yeah.
defensive, just trying to
Nope.
make sure we get this all done. We good? Okay. All right. Forgive me, I just want to see if I had anything else. Looks like I had nothing else. Sorry for the delay, just wanted to be sure they were taken care of. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have committee reports under paragraph 3, A, B, C, D, and E. I have a motion to approve those items.
You hadn't asked about Stony Brook. They're on here. I don't know if they have
Yeah,
anything.
I was going to ask
I-
Joe if he had anything.
Actually, I don't unless you have questions for me.
I do. There was an issue that was brought up in here.
Let me just
regarding-
for a
I'm
second.
sorry.
Joe McCulca, Stony Brook Advisory Committee Chairman.
Okay, I'm on page 21, folks. And you indicated that there was a problem as far as district council costs, et cetera, and there was this instruction, refer all calls back. Everything okay on that?
I believe so. I did receive an email from Stephen saying that it was credited back. And it all started with an individual that was a resident of our community, that we basically gave him the information. It was information that had originally been provided by Tony Piers at a previous date, I think 2 years prior, and I guess that wasn't good enough. So he called into the Gateway office, which started a whole process here that we were not aware of as a board or advisory committee. And that ran up a bit of a legal bill, and I felt that that wasn't our responsibility.
So my question then becomes, the other part of the question is everybody on board and everybody knows the procedure if anything like that happens in the future, et cetera?
I believe so. Okay. Thank you.
That's the deal.
Okay, anybody else, anything else? Not that I'm looking for trouble or anything, but, all right, thank you.
Thank
And
you, Joe.
take care. Good, thank you for your efforts.
He'll be on the 17th. That's true.
I'll say it again. I mean, you won't be it, John.
All right.
Already, who are you?
See? On but not forgotten.
Are we ready now to
Forgotten but not gone.
Yeah.
do all on the committee reports, do you think?
I think so.
May I have a motion to approve items, paragraph 3, items A through E?
Do we need to do that?
Hmm?
Do we need to do that?
Well, as long as there's stuff in there that we want to go back and say that we approved it. You don't want to do it?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the committee reports.
All right, may I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second, any further conversation? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0, Mr. Manager. Consent agenda, paragraph 4, approval of minutes, financial reports, stormwater pond site inspection report. I suspect there will be some conversation on some of these. Doug, do you have anything that you want to particularly talk about on these? When we get to the financial report, I'm going to ask Stephen to give us a brief summary of our year's operations, if
Okay.
that's okay. Do you have anything
Yeah.
else you'd like to talk about?
No, not right now.
Mark?
Nope. I'm fine.
Gary?
I just wanted to see the new chairs.
Did you see them?
No, but the first thing I flipped to is Doug Banks made the motion to approve chairs. Whatever.
They're not for you, Gary.
They're pool chairs, Dougie.
Oh, the pool chairs. Oh, yeah.
See, you don't even know what you even submitted. How about that?
Before we go ahead on the consent agenda, paragraph 4, Stephen, would you give us a brief summary of our year's operation, financially speaking?
I need to get around the other chairs.
Those are new chairs.
Yes, that's what I was, yeah. Stephen Bloom, Severn Trent. What you have in your package is the September, last month of the year for 2016. These are what I call unaudited preliminary financials. We are still working on reconciliations as well as preparing for the audit. So what you have on here, that's page 63. So what you have again is a preliminary. You will have several more opportunities to look at these numbers again as a part of the audit process. So this is by no means the last time you will see this. I will kind of go through and highlight some points, both where we're looking at as well as giving you kind of an overview of how the year went. Overall, it was a very good year, starting with the general fund, which is the page 63. Revenues wound up at 99.4% of your budget. There are a couple areas that we are looking into to kind of pinpoint some variances that we saw. The soccer park use was down. We've kind of been looking at the different leagues and parks and stuff, vendors to see where the shortfall is. That's kind of one of our reconciling items. On the plus side, your RV parking lot revenue actually wound up over budget by about $300. So again, good numbers. Now, when you look at the bottom line, and I'm just going to kind of skip ahead a little bit to the bottom page. It's 67. So I think it's an important number to look at. Our overall, and again, preliminary, and I say that because any vendors that still turn in invoices at this point that are related to 2016 will get recorded into 2016 as a part of the final process. But when you look if you go down a little bit more, the key line there is your revenues over under expenditures. It's a positive $370,000 for the year right now. So again, that's a very nice number to have. Now what happens is, as you can see, we are going to record a reserve of about $255,000. That is the reserve that goes to your capital asset fund. So that will come out. It's a non-cash item, so you don't see it on here, but that will come out of the 369. But even taking that out, you still have a nice surplus for the year. Now, what happens as a part of the budget process is all expenditures, all appropriations lapse at year end. So while you do have the cash, and it will be going to your fund balance, it does not automatically get carried forward any items. So we will be presenting to you, if there are any items, more specifically to your capital projects, that you need to continue and improve. So this money goes into your fund balance, it's there, but you're not going to just automatically spend it on something that wasn't paid for in the current year. That's kind of an important point. But it's just a good number to see. The same when you kind of roll forward to Pelican Preserve. Now their number is not as high after the transfer, page 70. But again, a nice positive number because there's a $363,000 budgeted transfer to their capital asset fund or fixed asset reserve. But right now their positive number is about $382,000. So again, it's not a high number, but it is a good number. Now, the only sticking point or the reminder that I would say on Pelican Preserve, one of our action items is to make sure we have every invoice related to the HOA agreement recorded. We did run into that this year where we thought they had turned everything in over to the district, and they actually wound up turning in some extra stuff. So we're going to work on that as well. So, but again, very good numbers, and this includes some of the extra spending that wasn't originally budgeted that was approved.
Is there impact fee revenue shown
Yes,
on here?
yes, it does. If you want to go
correct
back up
as
to
credit?
68, that was $175,000.
You just triggered a thing that I wanted to ask about. There was damage that was done to the gatehouse recently. Yeah, apparently a truck smashed into the main gate entry and decided.
The overhead?
At Pelican?
Yeah.
Okay.
To the archway. Are we biting the bullet for that? Did somebody get some insurance claim going for that? Does anybody know?
Yes, I know.
We're covered?
Yeah, originally we had submitted it to our insurance for a claim, so we did go through the process, and ultimately, we were working with Jason and with Castle Group, right? Was it Castle Group, I think? And I believe a claim was made and is being reimbursed off of the driver's policy.
You should be.
Good.
Good. Good.
When did this happen?
About a week ago. I mean, it had to be quite a large truck that tried to make its way through.
This one was more than a week ago.
Yeah.
This was.
Senior citizen, what can I tell you? That's
I hope it
the
hasn't been
first
hit
time I
again.
noticed it.
Because what I'm talking about is way more than a week ago.
Then something's occurred, and in fact, the repair guy was there today.
You should check. It's got.
So there's been another one.
I don't know.
Okie dokie. Yeah, there was a repair person there today blocking that gate. Okay.
A key point, though, on the revenue is the fire impact fees, because they are having a tangible effect. I mean, we budgeted 25,000. We were always budgeting conservative, but the actual came in at about $175,000, which pushed the total revenue compared to budget at 107.5% of the budget. So, more good news. Mm-hmm. So that's an important point. And then again, you know, there are some other additional spending that wasn't a part of the original budget. Pond aeration is the big number here on page 70, $428,000 that was approved. But even with all of that we're talking about, it's still good to see a favorable number show up at the bottom. Stony Brook is the only fund that didn't come in with a favorable number. Page 72 is the bottom line number. It had a unfavorable of about 41 right now. Of that, 63,000 is related to the capital outlay. And let me get the details, remind myself again.
For what, Stephen?
Yeah, I just need to look at my notes.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so it was for pavement maintenance for the Stony Brook pathways. So that makes.
And it was taken out of the balance sheet, I believe.
Yeah, no, it's not a problem. It's just the results of showing that it was all approved. But without that, I guess my point is it also would be a favorable year.
Okay.
Looking at the big fund, the enterprise fund, starting on page 81. Kind of the first big number that pops out is connection fees. For the year, we had budget about $250,000, and the actual connection fees were $731,000 in connection fees. And again, we budget to be conservative, but that's actually $61,000 more than last year. So we're even favorable compared with obviously a nice number of $730,000. Also, if you look at the very last column under variances for the top three lines, which is your water, irrigation, and sewer, you have three nice favorable variances in terms of year-to-year revenue generated by obviously the water, water, irrigation, and sewer. Water is about $134,000 favorable, $24,000 is irrigation, and sewer is about $78,000. The only thing that's not favorable is penalties, which is not a bad thing. And penalties came in at about $2,300 less. And I bring this up because we kind of talk about from year to year the utility rates and obviously growth, the effect of the meter program, and you can see a tangible effect from year to year on that.
That said, is there a time that you foresee that a rate study should be done?
I will have that answer to you probably by December. As a function of the bonds, one of the compliance items is for me to update a 5-year plan, and that 5-year plan is going to look at your revenues, it looks at your expenses, it looks at your capital planning, and it basically is to determine whether or not you have sufficient revenue to cover all of that plus your debt service.
When was the last time we did?
Last year.
Last year?
Every year it's required.
Yeah.
And I basically just rolled the year forward one more year. and
So
then
you're
obviously take
predicting
into.
you'll do that on
Yes.
the first meeting in December.
Yep, it's due to the, per the bond requirements, I think, November 30th or something is when I have to have it done, so. Now, the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on is on page 83. One of the things that we do when we budget for the wastewater portion of the contract is we budget the highest possible amount that could be in terms of the rates. But as you can see there, there was no change in the rates for the year for 2016. So there is about a $500,000 favorable variance in spending. Again, there will be a true-up process for all of this, but it's not going to. Basically, it shows you again another place where you have a nice variance. At the end of the day, when you look at the entire utility fund and take all this stuff into effect, your net change in assets is about $612,000. Again, I have to keep reminding you this is preliminary. But that is, again, a nice number to have. That number does not include right now any additional transfers to the fixed asset. We will be doing a transfer there of at least $271,000, which was budgeted, and an additional amount can be transferred if the board wishes to. Those are your major funds. I did want to touch on, we can kind of fast forward this a little bit to page 93. One of the schedules that we include each month is a kind of review of your reserve. It's like a reserve schedule for each of the major funds. And what this will show is where we started the year, what was spent throughout the year, what's committed to be spent, because that's an important piece of this, any additional reserves. So right now, based on what's committed for the general fund, is about $1.16 million in the general fund fixed asset reserve. Pelican Preserve will have about $960,000 once we do the 2016 transfer. Stony Brook will have about $80,000, and the Enterprise Fund will have $544,000. That number assumes that the board does not decide to increase the transfer amount. So my point is we keep track of what is still committed for these projects, and if you carry this forward to the next page, we do it on a project-by-project basis. And this is kind of the schedule that we're going to have to look at now that we're done. If you can roll to the next page, please. So this is schedule by schedule, and that's the next task is to look at any of these projects and see if there's any amount planned that has not been committed that we do need to bring back to the board for approval prior to continuing the project or starting any new projects. So that is something else that we will be bringing to the board for review. And that's kind of top level.
Thanks, Steve. Board members have questions for Steve?
Yeah, the refurbishing of the irrigation zones, that's based on just kind of that 30%, just as kind of a number? Is that it, or is there a specific thing that's been discovered that's going to need updating or replacement or repair?
I'm not sure about in terms of you're talking about why it's 30 versus 100%.
Exactly.
70% is being allocated to the utility fund.
Okay.
But that is one of those numbers that we did kind of try and put a little bit in each year, just to have some there.
Okay.
You good?
I'm good.
Yeah? Margaret?
I'm good.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Steve. Nice summary.
Thank you.
Gary, did you want to talk about the stormwater pond site inspection report as usual?
Will anything change?
Is that the truth?
Therefore, it becomes pointless.
Say again?
It becomes pointless.
Anyone else have anything that they want to discuss in the paragraph 4 consent agenda? Motion for approval, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 4A to 4E, I
Thank-
believe.
Thank you. Have a second.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further conversation?
No.
All, excuse.
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Mr. Manager. And we have already taken care of the business item, paragraph 5, so now we are at staff reports, paragraph 6, District Council. Pelican Reserve Fourth Amended Engineers Report.
Yes, sir, and Mr. Chairman, if you could, Mr. Lapida's bond counsel is planning on calling in, and I know he's watching the board meeting, so if we could just have a moment to allow him to call in, we're calling him.
Okay, so I think there's instructions over there?
There are instructions here. I thought I understood the attorney to say that this man was calling.
I believe.
It's a conference number.
Conference number.
So we just need a conference in.
Ah, Diane heard us. Thank you, Diane.
Welcome to Ready Access by Level 3 Communications. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign.
Hang up, Mr. Agnes. Hang up.
I can't tell you how many times I've transposed.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Really? We're doing those things, or hit the star versus the pound. Some places call it pound, some places call it hash, some call it number sign. It's all the same thing.
You thought about taking some type of
Lessons? Mashing lessons?
Please enter your character.
No.
Start your conference, press 1. To start your conference now, press star. Or for a your conference will now begin. To report your call by pressing star 2 at any time. Or enter for an annual conference command, press star at any time. You will now be placed in conference.
Hold on.
You said it was kind of like, too many hits.
wait till he flies with the next captain does.
Yes, sir. David, are you there? Oh. Yeah, it was.
No.
Start checking. Oh, look at that.
It should be one more time when he goes in.
Arizona State.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hello, David, you there?
Hello.
Okay.
Is your speakerphone?
Tony, David is on. I just turned it up. Turned up the volume. Would you see if it's satisfactory now? David, you there?
Let me turn off the streaming so that there's no conflict.
Let me turn off the streaming. What?
Okay, thank you, David.
Stream this.
Star phone. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Yeah, but you said it was just fine. Oh,
Hey, I'm when you're ready.
Tony, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, David. We can hear you fine. You're on the speakerphone at the board meeting. This top.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
please tell the audience exactly to whom we're listening.
This is David Lapidas. He's District Bond Counsel with the law firm of Squire, Patton, and Boggs. I almost said Dempsey and Sanders, David, so I corrected myself.
Yeah, we changed our name.
Yeah, and David has been bond counsel on numerous transactions involving the district going back many, many years. So he's very familiar with the district and the various bond issues and the community. And this is a discussion, a proposal for the board to consider and adopt a fourth amended engineers report involving the Pelican Preserve, the Pelican Preserve Series 2013 Special Assessment Revenue Refunding Bond, Series 2013 Bond, Fourth Amended Engineers Report. And Tetra Tech, Danny and Tyler prepared the report, and we had some review. by the various district staff and by bond counsel, and including the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee. And what I'd like, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, is have Tyler or Danny walk you through the report briefly, and then if you have any questions about the report, and then there's a resolution that has been prepared by Mr. Lapidus, that if the board is favorably inclined to adopt the fourth amended engineers report, we would ask the board's consideration of adopting the resolution, which will adopt the report. And but before you take that action, you need to take public speakers, and as Mr. Caldwell indicated, he's signed up to speak on that. So David, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, Mr. Nelson will walk us through the report. Mr. Lapidus will walk us through the resolution. This was an add-on item. I apologize. We're sent out supplemental.
Oh, yes, the amendment.
I apologize for that.
I've got it.
And I have extra copies for any board members that wish to
I
have.
think that we need at least one. Doug, do you have the engineer?
No, I don't have a copy of it.
We need some down here. Is it this?
Well, this was what was in the.
It's double-sided, just to make sure.
No, this is the memorandum.
It's a revised memorandum with the document. But the resolution is the same, and the fourth amendment engineers report will be the same. Yes.
So, in essence, Danny, you're going to summarize?
I can make it long or I can make it short, but either way, it will be a summary.
Works for me.
Okay. Short? Got somewhere to go. For the record, Danny Nelson with Tetra Tech. So, as Tony mentions in his memorandum, this dates back to, I believe, about April. This was discussed, and following that, the board directed council and your district engineer to proceed with preparing this amended engineer's report. So I won't go into detail, but I'll kind of just simply walk you through, and I'll get you to the end fairly quickly, because that's really where the changes have been. So this report basically follows the format of the original and amended reports through 3. So the first portion of that, and I don't know if the audience has copies or if they can't see it, but the first portion is simply the introduction, which summarizes this version of the engineer's report and what its purpose is. I won't go into detail of that. Followed by a map of the area. So for everybody, just so you understand, this includes the Pelican Preserve as it was originally proposed for the purpose of the bond. So that does not include the portions where we're currently working that extends all the way over to Gateway Boulevard. So it's basically that corridor of Pelican Preserve Boulevard all the way to the south at Viadana. Following the summary of the introduction, there's a table that simply identifies what the original project was, how it was adjusted through amendments 1 and 2, and then talks about the purpose of that. Then it gets into requisitions that have been prepared to date, and then describes the remaining infrastructure. So I'm going to really get you down to the portion where it describes the remaining infrastructure. So,
Danny, can you just, I put it up on the screen.
Oh, you did?
Those pages.
Sorry. What is that page?
You're in your report. You're in your report, right?
This.
Sideways. I'm going to keep scrolling down to page 7.
Here's the original.
Yeah, that's really what I want to look at, is that page 7. So that is table 5. When the amended engineer's report number 3 was prepared, the purpose of that was to refinance the bonds, which led us to the current 2013 series now, I believe. Simply what took place at that point was the project as it existed was redefined based on what was remaining to be done, and a portion of those remaining funds were discussed for refund or for utilization towards infrastructure that was associated with that original project, being stormwater improvements. This engineer's report basically does the same thing, but simply adds more of that allocated fund towards identifying further of those stormwater improvement projects, leaving in two components that are roadway related, and that's the Vicenza Court, the new model center area, and the area south of, it's the portion of Pelican Preserve that's left, that goes to the Via Donna to the roundabout. Now, the portion south of the roundabout is private, so it's not included. So it includes about $65,000 worth of roadway final lift work. And once that is done, I think WCI has made a request that work the final lift be applied. And I think we're in agreement that we're about there. I don't know if did you ride by there today? Yeah, so we didn't want any of that work to take place while there were heavy trucks going to be on the road and possibly damaging for that final lift. So I do believe we're at that. So essentially what this does...
Let me stop you on that.
Yes, sir.
Forget. There's still a bunch to get done in Palazzo.
Correct.
Therefore, the big trucks are definitely going to be driving on that.
On that portion south?
For sure.
Okay.
At most, it's 40%, 50% done at most. The buildings, the condo buildings. It's a lot to be done there.
Okay.
So,
Then I would recommend doing nothing, because I wouldn't do Vicenza Court just for the sake of doing it. It's a 500-foot section. It's not cost effective to do that work. I would do both at the same time. You're not obligated by this. That was just me summarizing. You're not.
Just to give you some
This is still in here. So essentially, that's what this engineer's report does. It recognizes what work has been done, what work is remaining, and what work is recommended for moving forward. I think, as Tony's mentioned, we have worked very closely with bond counsel and gone through this process.
one other question is just for clarification purposes. When you say that beyond the roundabout is private with the intention of turning it over at a later date? No?
No, I believe that south of Via Donna, the district road right-of-way ends in a bubble. I mean, you may not see it in the surface, but on the plat, that's how it ends. It's a curve.
Yes.
And then it goes on to, there's a roadway segment that goes on to Palazzo condominiums.
Correct.
That is not part of, not anticipated, in my understanding, to be any part of any district roadway network.
Okay, so i.e. it's the Sienna revisited.
It's a private road, it will stay with the condominium.
That's my understanding, once it gets
Well,
past.
Isn't Sienna, though, in fact, those roads that lead off of, isn't it in fact?
Sienna has its own private road as well.
That's what I was referencing. Okay, all right.
So in summary, essentially what this does is it redefines the drainage improvements that are a part of that original 2003 project and allocates more funds available for doing that work, and also recognizes aeration as part of that infrastructure to be performed, and then finally just recognizes the final lift work associated with those two areas. So that's essentially how this redefines the remaining portions of the project and how those funds would be allocated.
Questions for Danny? Stay right there, please.
I just have a comment, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Danny, if the board adopts and approves this fourth amended engineer's report, I think there's some formatting issues where Adobe and/or Word moved.
Yeah,
They disappeared.
We're seeing it right now, actually, on the screen. There's ainage repairs
Yes.
and some Enza Court, yes, and Elegant Preserve.
So I'm sure those will be addressed. That's just,
Yeah, that was something that took place between the Word version and the PDF version.
yeah, it happened on a couple of the tables. That's just for.
Other questions for Dan?
How do we, with the lift work, how will you guys, how should they coordinate when the work is closer to being complete so we don't have to run into?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good question. It leads to another question that that I'll follow up on myself that I'm going to create in my head. As far as that work goes, you know, we did the final lift on Pelican Preserve up to that point 2-3 years ago now, and you know, the concern even at that point was heavy truck traffic on there. So in our opinion, as long as they're doing construction work, until that work is complete, I wouldn't touch it. Now the follow-up question I had to that is how would you go about doing that? And you have multiple ways, and you can bid that out. Or how we did it previously was we simply piggybacked off of Lee County. They have continuing contracts with vendors to do miscellaneous work, and paving is one. So we simply got their permission to do the piggybacking. It was below the threshold allowed. We went through their contracts. They have multiple contracts, and selected the vendor that was most advantageous for the work that we had to do, and asked if they would be willing to utilize that contract as well. All parties said yes, and we moved forward with the contract that way.
Okay.
So.
And Mr. Chairman, Doug answered part of that question. PPAC monitors this, and we discuss it constantly when we think it's appropriate to move forward. Because our residents want it done.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So it is something that's constantly in front of us.
I didn't have any doubt that PPAC wasn't on top of.
And then the other part too is the striping aspect, which always is one of those things that seems to kind of be forgotten. But it isn't as inexpensive as you might think it is for the striping and for the markings.
And if I recall, striping south of the bridge, it was not previously striped. So I mean, that would have to be a decision. Do we want, you know, the main boulevard striped or not? Definitely.
Okay.
Any questions?
Mr. Attorney, I believe I'm obligated to ask members of the audience if they want to comment on this, and Mr. Caldwell, I believe, has indicated that he would like to comment on this, and so I'd like for him to come to the podium at this time.
Yes, I didn't know if you want to wait, and then David Lapidus address the resolution after Mr. Caldwell speaks, or you wish to have David?
I'd like to hear
Okay.
from Mr. Caldwell before we get into the
Okay.
resolution. Thank you.
Dave Caldwell, WCI for the record. I just received the same package you were looking at earlier today. So my general comment was understanding of what the district wants to do, but I need some clarifications, and I just wanted to point out a few things. Danny did talk to me earlier this year as to what I thought the WCI reimbursement would be submitted for, and I said, by my calculation after I called him back, was around $600,000. So that's correctly reported in Tony's summary of it, but I had a hard time picking that number out as to the engineer's report, and I just wondered, Danny, is that the way it's reflected?
That has actually been removed from the engineer's report.
Then I have a problem. Because I did state, when the engineer asked me what WCI, first off, the funds were originally programmed into your bond issue in 2003 to pay for certain infrastructure throughout the community of Phase 1. I understand that there are surplus funds, but the understanding that the developer has is that those funds, in this case $600,000, should be retained in your engineer's report so that it can reimburse the developer. Your engineer specifically asked us what we expected to ask for reimbursement. We gave him a number, $600,000. It's reflected in your attorney's summary of this update. And so I'm sort of amazed that the engineer has now dropped it because he didn't think it was appropriate.
May I ask a question here when you're finished?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of why it was dropped.
Can I ask the question, though? How did you, how did you calculate the 600,000, David? Just,
Well,
I'm not holding you to the nickel, you know that, but
I understand. I know because I did all the other requisitions that brought us to the, the funds, the $22 million that were expended. So I know pretty much what the district should and would reimburse. So going through the projects that, the two projects are really Palazzo in the drainage down there, and then some improvements that we did in the model area of Vincenza. Those are the two projects remaining that I expected to have some reimbursement requests to the district for. Based on the contracted costs that we had, because the infrastructure is in, but it's not fully certified yet, in that case, I know what the invoice cost is and what the district would typically reimburse. And that number was approximately $600,000.
all right. My question, a question that I've got, and this is also for clarification, but I understand that there are some problems.
Would you get a little closer to your mic, please?
Yes. I understand that there are some problems regarding flooding in the Palazzo area. That was described in an email as, quote, serious, unquote. Would there be any reflection regarding those problems that you're aware of, or are you not aware of it? And again,
No,
I'm
I'm aware of it, but there's lots of, that's independent of the drainage facilities that I expected, that was part of the $600,000. And as I said just moments ago, we haven't gotten to the point where this drainage system is certified and ready for turnover.
Okay.
Palazzo as a neighborhood has a lot of drainage that will be part of the condominium and taken care of by the condominium. There are some drainage facilities that will be district, that we think are district related and district owned and maintained when we finally get it to a certification process and ready to go to the district.
Okay, then this does bring up another thing. We're kind of piggybacking on what Doug's question because he wasn't aware, but now this is a new issue. Does this mean then that we're going to have a separate drainage system in Palazzo that's going to in fact go into the CDD's drainage system, and in fact we will have no control over a second party with a system that connects into the main CDD system? Is that what you're saying?
But you have that throughout the community as well already.
Not really.
Yes, you do.
Okay. As Ricky said to Lucy, explain that to me.
There's things such as rear yard drainage that are in small diameter PVC pipe that pick up drainage from the yards and discharge it into larger culvert pipes that are the district system. That's throughout the community now.
Yeah, but, first of all, there was a permit criteria manual change regarding the dispersal of rainwater or other water to try to better control it. And secondly, I would think that Palazzo is, and especially with the report that I received as far as the problems that they're having, I would think that this is something that behooves that the engineer is going to have to get involved. This is my opinion. Would have to be involved to try to give us better information as to what we're taking on as a system coming into the CDD system, and of course based upon what happened a few years ago and the discoveries that occurred a couple of years ago, that we'd want to be very sure that something of this magnitude was properly what's the word I'm looking for, Tony? It isn't going to be conveyed, it's going to be a...
There'd be a conveyance, and then that leads to some other issues as to date of construction of these facilities. as opposed to the date when you're proposing to have them turned over.
Correct.
I understand that some of those facilities have been in the ground for
Well,
years.
I think, this discussion is really independent of this Fourth Amendment to the engineer's report that deals with the funds that are allocated to various projects within the district. My point was, when you got involved with this about a year ago, Danny contacted us as to what WCI anticipated funding for reimbursement of drainage systems or paving within communities that we are still building in. I gave him a number, and now he tells me he decided not to use it.
Okay.
I have a problem with that.
Okay, can we just hold there for a second?
Okay.
David, looking at the engineer's report, it seems to me that you/WCI has not submitted a request for funds from the bond payment for several years.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
Oh, no, very much correct. Mainly because both of those communities are still under construction. Both Vicenza as a model area and Palazzo, we're only halfway through it. We've just built a few buildings in the last few years.
Can you give us any idea of, number one, when additional requests from the bond fund are going to be submitted, and number two, when that construction is scheduled to be completed?
Well, I would hope, I don't have an exact number. I'm thinking possibly in 2017. The Palazzo, as I say, some of the drainage in Palazzo, there was no intention that that would go to the district, that would stay within the condominium. The drainage facilities that are related to the district are done, they've been done for years, but they haven't been certified. We haven't asked you to come out and inspect them. So that technically could probably get moved forward and be under consideration by your staff and consultants
But
in 2017.
Did you answer my first question as to when you might submit your next request?
Probably in 2017.
Oh, I guess you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
I thought you were answering when you were going to be finished.
For the requisitions, 2017.
And for completion?
If you mean completion of like Palazzo, that's all, is that what you sort of were directing? Because once we make whatever we do in 2017, I don't think there'll be anything else from the developer for a requisition.
And you're holding to your 600,000 number, is that correct?
From my side, yes, but I assume that the district engineer or staff or others may have questioned some of it, but right now, what I have invoices related to the works that we did that I think are district-related, yes, it's about 600,000.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I think a motion to table this item is in order.
Before, Mr. Chairman, if I may just, for the
Please.
record, a couple things. One is the review and the engineer's report was a collective decision by district council, bond council, engineer, and as well as acting district manager to modify it in the manner that you see. Secondly, I guess one question if I can ask David. David, did the infrastructure that's in place, did old WCI build it or new WCI?
Some of both.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I believe we are not of a meeting of the minds of all of the parties. 600,000 is not a dollar amount that I'd care to write a check for anytime soon, and I think we ought to table this until the parties get together and work it.
I'll make a motion to table.
I have a motion to table. May I have a second?
I'll second.
And I have a motion to second, a second to table, a motion to table with properly seconded as a preferential motion, and no further discussion is in order. All in favor of tabling the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Mr. Manager. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if we could also, appropriate for staff to have the authorization direction to meet with Mr. Caldwell and WCI representatives to work through some of these issues. I have a number of concerns with regards to the facilities that have been in an extended period of time. If you recall, when we had the issue with the infrastructure and old WCI disclaiming any responsibility, that was in the phase 1 area. And we paid for the remedial actions out of the bond proceeds. And there's also an issue with regards to what we were bumping up against in the litigation against the engineers called the statute of repose, which is a maximum 10-year period of time if you have late defects involving in the infrastructure. And the fact that these facilities have been in the ground for an extended number of years, I think will be part of our discussion that we have at WCI. But if we can have that authorization to proceed with that.
You have that authorization.
Yeah, I assume also work with Nancy Hall from PPAC, because she's been very much helping that. Thank you.
Would you say goodbye to your friend?
David, thank you for being so patient and kind, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I mean, one point I do want to make is that we really do need, I mean, we've got bond proceeds that have been sitting out for a long time. Typically, we try to get them spent within 3 years of the issuance of the bonds. And so we really want to move forward and either spend the money on allowable improvements, which the engineer's report was trying to identify, or we need to declare the project complete and use those funds to redeem bonds. But I think we need to push on this and spend the money or use it to redeem bonds as expeditiously as possible, but still preserving the rights of all the parties.
Thank you very much for your patience and your advice. Goodbye.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Bye. Might know how to turn it. Which one?
Beetle.
I do that one?
I think it's the one with the phone on it.
That's it. I got it. Well. Mr. Attorney, would you like to start us off on the SRF draft resolution?
Yeah, it was on there as an agenda item. I did not provide the resolution. It's already drafted, but what I would anticipate the next board meeting, the complete application would come before you along with the resolution, and I think we're working on completing the application. And we'll have that for the 17th agenda. And that's still timely, Danny and Tyler, for the SRF program?
17th of November.
November, yes. Thank you.
Hey, and
Yes.
You may just stay there, because you're on next.
Yeah, and I have a question for
I
Danny.
have a few more items after that.
Oh, you
just
do?
general reports.
My question is just around SRF.
Oh.
So at the last meeting, we asked Tetra Tech to go back or staff to look at SRF funding to see what we could fund from a resource perspective. Did you guys come back with?
From a resource.
Yeah, I don't think you were here. I think it was Tyler.
You know,
I think you're on vacation.
Hey, I'm Tyler Wainwright with Tetra Tech. The discussion I think you're talking about is basically whether Gateway can hire staff with SRS funds.
Yes.
The answer to that is
dedicated to the project.
Answer to that is no, they cannot. I think
that is correct. SRF in what you currently have approved, you have $300,000 in construction phase. And one of the things that SRF does require is inspection services. You cannot use that to hire staff to perform that. So you can't just go and say, we need a new staff member, we can use those funds for that. So that would have to be by an outside party to do that work. But we have actually been discussing the entire project internally. In fact, we had a very good discussion yesterday, and I think our plan is to come back and give a update at the 17th meeting and kind of let you know kind of how the whole program would lay out from both the contractual and the work side as well as the resource side and who would be doing what and what the recommendations would be at least. But no, you cannot use those funds for hiring staff at Gateway.
So you'd have to contract it out.
You'd have to contract that work out. Now you can do inspection in-house, yes, but you can't hire a resource to do that. I mean, you can't hire a resource and use those funds to do that. If you use their funds, it has to be through contractual.
Okay.
Thanks, Danny. Mr. Attorney, you
Yes,
have
sir.
some more things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few items. There have been some rumors with regards to the intent of the city of Fort Myers, with regards to its utility service area. And so I sent an email to, I telephoned Grant Alley, the city attorney, and his office asked that I put in writing what my queries were with regards to the city's intentions, and I'm handing out the email I sent out to his office today, asking Grant, please advise as to whether any recent, i.e. within the last 3 months, discussions have been held, or any records, documents, or plans prepared or directed to be prepared by city staff or consultants or the city council concerning the city providing utility services to unincorporated areas of Gateway Services Community Development District, the city providing utility service to the district utility customers and properties within the district utility service area within Pelican Reserve, and the city's acquiring the utility system owned by the district. So just to find out what might be lurking or in the formative minds of the members of the.
Did you tell me one an answer by the 17th?
I can always follow up with that. He's out of town right now, so but again, April had been, Danny, I think Danny and Tyler had seen some plans for State Road 82 widening, where there's an interconnection with the city's utility lines, with some other utility lines. And Danny can explain that, and then April had heard something from Pam Kai, so this is an effort to, let's just get it out.
Yeah, I think that what kind of raised, our eyebrows was that for the record, Danny Nelson, Tetra Tech, is that the infrastructure for the State Road 82 widening wasn't just like a 4 or 6 inch line. It was a pretty substantially sized lines for water, sewer, and I think irrigation. So it kind of raises some eyebrows as to where is that going. We've actually contacted the city as well, and they've declined so far to meet. So that's what prompted Tony to do what he's done. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think there were requests by Chris and others to meet with the city of Fort Myers to find out more about this. Traffic control agreement, I'm still waiting Grant Alley's review of that, so I'll push him on that. Road turnover, November 21st, I'm meeting with John Ferdima. I'm reviewing the title, re-reviewing the title commitment, had a conversation with the title company, and also reviewing the survey for any comments I may have, and then have that conversation with John with the idea of immediately thereafter submitting the package to the county. And the Pelican Reserve Community Association Agreement for operation and maintenance. Chris Davies, their attorney, I've nudged him a touch, and he said he will get back as soon as possible, because we need to have that agreement updated and in place. And nothing further.
Any questions for the attorney?
No.
Thank you very much, Tony. Now.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, one other item.
One other thing.
What I did, I forwarded to all the board members and to all the candidates, and I inadvertently left off Mr. Huskamp and Ms. Feinberg also as candidates, I apologize. An email from 2014 involving the same Attorney General's opinion 98 with regards to member-elect, just so all the board members can see what I advised in 2014, which is the same I advised in the past, and also all the candidates can see it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engineer.
We have nothing. Like I said, we'll be bringing back more on the Lake Bank project at the next meeting. And in case, for whatever reason, I'm not here, Pam and Gary, it's been a pleasure. So thank you.
And we'll have a update the 17th on the storage facility.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of good progress has been made on that as well.
April, operations manager.
Is there any specific questions that we have about it?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Newbauer? Yeah. Specific question.
Page 125. Natural resources, item 4.
That's good.
Your report says bid proposals, pond and conservation, due by October 17th, presentation to the board on November 3rd. It's November 3rd.
Yeah, oops, sorry, April White, your operations manager. We had a little discussion that delayed it, and so it's coming on the 17th. We had some issues with one of the bids. It was low, so there was some conversation among staff on what we wanted to do and whether we needed to vet it for another review. But now we're back on track for bringing it before you on the 17th.
So we're assured it'll be there on the 17th.
Yes.
Okay, page 127. Pool facility needs an outside shower replaced. This seems like something that's going on for a long time. Talking about last time starboard and all this other stuff. Is this something that's still in process, trying to figure out how to fix it?
It is still in process, and they are working with getting some new bids right now. We had our bids, I believe they received 2 proposals, and they were not apples to apples comparisons because one vendor was unable to provide the shower stalls. And the material that they are, so they don't rust or they're not corroding, is like a starboard material, some sort of resin. And so we want to make sure that we replace the stalls. So now we're back on track. I believe staff spoke to either 1 or 2 commercial vendors this week. I just haven't received the paperwork from them yet.
So we have no one on staff that's capable of doing this kind of construction.
Oh, no, sir.
Maybe the board should consider that we do need someone on staff that has that capability.
We need a lot of staff considerations, and
And
we'll
the
be
other
getting
thing,
to it.
Item number 17, also stated in here to be delivered to us on the 3rd. Fairway Lakes lighting.
Tony and I had some correspondence. I had a little bit of confusion with what we were doing. He was gracious enough to draft a letter, and I had suggested a revision to make me the contact, and I did not understand that he wanted me to make the revision and mail them out. So I'm a little behind on that. We got our signals crossed.
We got our signals crossed in time, so it'll be going out this week, I think.
I would hope so.
So on the 17th, this issue can finally be finalized?
Well, you'll see the letter that will have gone out to all the property owners saying, we're not gonna take care of it anymore after a drop dead date, which will push back a little bit to the first week in December. And you will be responsible, we're not paying anymore.
Okay.
So that's what will be in the letter.
Just so that everybody understands that we're done with this.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And April and I had one of those a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
It just came together. Was that today or yesterday? Today.
Any other questions for our operations manager?
I don't have any.
Okay, I have 3 additions.
Well, please proceed.
That were not on there, and one of those is the Landscape Advisory Committee. So we had a resignation of the chair on that. I sent an email to that. And so I didn't know if we wanted to discuss that and you provide me some direction, or if we just wanted to do a call for a candidate. I think we've already tried to get the 5th seat filled, and now there's 2 seats. So I wasn't sure with the roadway master plan that we're working on, because we already have a community outreach planned on that, whether the Landscape Advisory Committee was something that needed to continue, or what we were going to do with that.
Here's my recommendation. So when you have a committee that is responsible for certain activities, and it's a challenge to field that committee becomes non-functional. Doesn't mean the individuals that are still participating are not important, but I think we shift gears on this and probably have them more as maybe work groups, which means that there are certain individuals that we have either has been on the committee or with certain expertise that we can bring in for any input around any specific action or just to vet things out. I think we could probably transition the landscaping committee into, you can almost dissolve it and just pull those folks that would be participating or others in when we need their input. It just seems like we've struggled to keep people on that specific committee. So by no means am I saying that input is not important, I'm just saying that I think we can structure it a little differently so we get the input we need from the residents without having the restrictions of having a set defined committee.
There was a statement, I believe, in there that talked about that the gentleman mentioned that the date of the meetings or day of the meetings was changed. And I believe that was part of his reason for going off the committee. Is that true?
I believe that was his committee at work with the city of Fort Myers.
Oh,
His priority obligation changed.
I construed it to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because haven't we had open, I mean, Kathleen, you're on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've had open positions on that for a while, right? I mean, haven't you struggled?
We had one open position, right?
So Kathleen, do you mind stepping up for a second? April, do you mind?
No.
So what my recommendation is to basically, at this time, not to have a formal committee, but still continue to pull people like yourself and others that have subject matter expertise when there are very specific pieces of information or feedback required. How do you know, you've been on that committee, how do you feel about that?
Excuse me, Kathy Flaherty, Landscaping Committee. I had come to the board several months ago for an alternate so that this would not occur, and that motion was denied, so.
For an alternate?
For our committee.
Okay.
Okay, because there was a chance at that point, we had somebody who would be interested in being an alternate, and if an opening occurred, they would have wanted it. But since then, they decided not to. But I know we have 3 people. I thought if we changed the date, that JB would be able to attend. I didn't know if that was a possibility too. Because his work requirement means that he can't meet on the day we meet. So I didn't know if we could change our date.
I mean, does it matter what date?
He submitted a resignation, so he didn't ask the question, can we change the date? He submitted a resignation, so.
Okay.
Kathy, would you respond to what Doug suggested about?
A work group?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm on the pond work group. I go to that all the time too.
So, I mean, it's basically, it's a committee without all the structure.
Yeah.
And you're pulled in when you need to. Now, what I don't want to do is, I don't want to take away any, any movement or a resident's ability to, to influence by having a set committee. And I think, I don't.
Those three people can continue
Yeah.
on in the master plan.
I just think it gives us a little more
that
flexibility,
voice.
and you can add people to it as you need to expand based on, especially with the things that we have going on with the landscaping design. You may need to pull 1 or 2 additional people in and kind of float between subject matter expertise. To me, it makes more sense. And that also allows us to not have to dedicate staff resources for, capturing minutes and all those different things. I think we vet out and then let staff come back with recommendations and summaries.
Kathy, what do you feel about that?
I will go along with the board, but, I know that we've had presentations for landscaping, and we were supposed to have another presentation because our landscaping committee, there wasn't a quorum last time. So that presentation wasn't presented.
And I don't think it precludes you from presenting any information or anything along those lines. It just makes it a little bit more informal. So.
I'm just a member. I'm not the vice chair or the chair or the secretary. I'm just a little member of this committee.
And I know with the master plan, the landscaping master plan, that gentleman is gonna be coming back with some presentations. And he was gonna make those 2 the landscaping committee, correct?
We did that.
Yes.
There
It
was
is.
2.
Right.
We were scheduled for 2, and he did 2. It was
Yeah.
1 presentation, it was just a long one, so we had to split it.
And honestly, I would love for a board member to be able to step in along with staff in those work groups if needed, so we have proper representation, we're pulling in the right people, and we're just not confined to having a structured committee where, if you don't have quorum, then things don't happen. I think we'd be more productive by being less structured, in my opinion.
And Tony, work groups?
I'll be having a conversation with April about that, about what we might need, what compliance we might need to have, and how we can structure that to ensure
Okay.
there is compliance.
Okay,
And so I'll have some conversations with April about that.
okay.
And bring something back, I think December 1st, we're anticipating bringing something back to the board.
Is there anything formal that we'd have to do to,
Dissolve the
yeah,
committee?
to sunset the landscaping committee?
Do we
I think we
really
have a
want it?
resolution that
Hmm?
established, I think we need to have if we did, I think we need to have a resolution to dissolve. I'll check the record.
Can you just check and, okay, and that would just be my recommendation moving forward, is just, we continue with the work, just do it in a less formal manner.
Are you okay so far? Whoop.
Yeah, okay.
I
Kathleen,
said
thanks, thank you.
I've gone along with the board.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
That was number one.
Yes. Second one, I recently learned that we had a water advisory committee. I didn't know. So there was an issue that was discussed with Tony regarding the utility project and some conversations between the chair, Mr. Tinkle, of the Water Advisory Committee. And so I didn't know, Tony, is this the appropriate time to discuss that now as far as whether the board would be interested in going through the formality of designating him as a representative or not designating him as a representative
I think
to
that's going to be an item, it should be a scheduled agenda item.
scheduled agenda? Okay.
That's my recommendation to the board.
Accepted.
And the last thing is, I was hoping that Mr. Measy would be here to, I didn't know, since we had the meeting with the city of Fort Myers, we were going to move forward with painting over the bicycle chevrons. And I know that there was at a board meeting, it was discussed that we were gonna hold off on that until that meeting happened with the city of Fort Myers. The meeting happened with the city of Fort Myers. Chris attended, Tyler attended. I don't know if you wanted to recap on that. But the way that I understand it is it's the jurisdiction of the district, and we were going to move forward with taking those off.
I think somebody should prepare a report to that, not just some
I agree.
stand
Okay,
at the
on the-
altar type
I
thing.
agree.
Okay, on the agenda?
We need an agenda item,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
Absolutely.
Are you anticipating any feedback or pushback?
course.
Okay.
Were there any other questions? That was it for me. That was my three. That's all I
Okay.
had. Any other questions?
Thank you. District manager, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
How about our utility manager?
Good afternoon, Chris Shoemaker, Utility Manager, and I have half a dozen items. I'll just give you a brief update on it if you have any questions. But I had in my report that our project status with TICA has been unknown because I've been chasing them for weeks and I can't even get a response from them by email, et cetera. And even after having some words with the regional manager, but the construction manager stopped by yesterday because he said he wanted to get the project off on the right foot.
You telling me it was
And-
too late?
Well,
Where were you last week?
He's busy, and I said I thought you guys were in a hurry, but they are getting ready to get started, and they're going to start calling for some locates next week, and start actual construction the week of the 14th, which will be the first segment of their line from Griffin to Gateway, and it'll come back to the point of connection over by Timber Marsh. And they'll spend that week getting that line in and energizing it. And then the week of Thanksgiving, they're going to be doing some very limited work. After the week of Thanksgiving, it'll pick up full speed ahead, and they should be done within 3 weeks with the installation of the line and all the appurtenances. And they may be around another week after that for restoration. I let them know that we were going to videotape the route, and it has to look exactly like it does when they're finished as it does when it started. So, but we do have everything in place to get going and make it a successful project, and we'll be out there every day with them. wastewater pump station control telemetry. Are getting the Verizon SIM cards that we needed for that. Had to order them. We'll get them in either tomorrow or Monday, and BCI Technologies will be out in the middle of the week to install those cards in the SCADA system and link it to our alarm system for the SCADA. So that project's moving ahead. Installation of remaining water meters continues to be a struggle. Monday, the contractor said he had an emergency. Tuesday, he got 1 meter in. Wednesday, he got 2 meters in, and they didn't show up for work today, and they never work on Fridays. So we got 3 in this week. I will say that it's an immense amount of work with these larger meters and older ones, some of them being 2-inch meters and concrete vaults and just roots and limbs and old plumbing. And it is quite a bit of work, but I expected them to be doing 2 to 3 meters a day, not 2 to 3 a week. And they keep telling me they're going to pick it up, but they're moving forward, and most all the irrigation's done. The potable meters will be after hours and on weekends, because you're looking at the schools, the Gardner buildings, commercial establishments, the dog wash place, and we can't really cut them out of water, beauty salons, that type of thing, so it'll be after hours.
Hey,
But-
Chris, what leverage do we have on these installers? Do we have
Well-
any leveraging power?
Not really. When the purchase order was set up for them, there wasn't a time frame. It's just we met with them and they said we'd have a crew of 4 and we'll be doing 3 to 4 meters a day. And they inspected all of them, and I think it's just something that they're not making much money, if any, on, and it's one of the last things they want to do. So if they have an emergency or something comes up, they just come on over. But they have been working they've been more consistent the last 3 or 4 weeks. For a couple weeks there, they basically weren't even here, but they're back to it. But we're down to about 33 meters to install,
Yeah.
so I'm hoping in the next month that, especially since we'll be working on Saturdays and after hours, that we can, go right in and start knocking them out at a better pace.
Okay.
Pond 104 revisited, met with the contractors last time. We're looking at early, first week in January start date, only to let the water levels recede. We'll be out there probably about 3 weeks, and I'll be clearing an agreement with Tony and talk to the property owners, let them know we'll be removing all the vegetation that we need to, and it won't be replaced.
And you've got, I think you had told me, just so the board knows, we've got standing operating procedures, at least now, right, in place for when we go on, the things that our vendors should do, should not do, from lessons learned in the past. So
And we have a code of conduct, and I went over it with the vendor, and we talked about everything from where people park, where they access the easement, a portalet. That we have to have one on site, and the property owner even volunteered, you can stick it in my backyard, but you have to get the truck back there to pump it. But we're going to get 4 sections of 8-foot fence from Home Depot and just enclose the portalet, so it's not a visual eyesore to anyone. But we're going all the way down to where we're gonna store the materials, all those types of details with them, and the plantings, and we'll have a regular landscape firm do the restoration. If we tear their sod up or put tire tracks, we're gonna level it all out. And last time they had the contractor come in, he just kind of threw it over the ruts. So,
and I just think
very
I think it's
very
important to
detailed.
call out, because, I mean, we're now starting to see accountability in this, in this position, and we're starting to build a little bit more, but definitely better public relations, but just a better overall approach. So, Chris, good job on that.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk to those folks, because a lot of times too, and we're even considering putting some signs up at the project sites if people are going by, because you want to know who you can call if there's a problem.
That's
You
a
don't want
great
to talk
idea.
to the guy on the Bobcat. And going out there and working and talking to the neighbors, and basically the way I put it to them is not only accountability on our part, on theirs, because we've listed all these items and they're going to initial off on them, and they kind of have to follow up with what they promised on their end. And then we said, if we run into any issues along the way that either of us haven't addressed, at least we can recognize, we haven't talked about that, let's sit down and resolve it.
Yeah, well, they're going to call this office
Yeah.
if there's an issue. So, thanks. What's your extension? What number is it?
And actually,
Is it 5, I think?
I give a lot of people my cell phone number so they don't have to go through the rotary, because sometimes that just annoys them. But
That's the one we're putting on the sign.
yeah. We're about done with the irrigation evaluation, except for one well that's left, and we were waiting for it to dry out. It's the one in the back of the soccer park, and we couldn't get the equipment back there, and they're gonna replace the motor while they're doing that work, and that will take place next week. And our trailer-mounted bypass pump is out in the back. It was delivered and went through some basic training today. It's a great piece of equipment. And this month, I'll be working on the request for bid for the standby generator and the lift station upgrades that we have in the budget. And we're also doing a little work, and this is basic stuff at Stony Brook. We have some grease problems out there at those lift stations. I haven't discovered why yet. I didn't know if everybody there bought an Emerald fryer.
Turkey fryer.
But we did have a vendor, actually. I told him I wanted to sample some of their grease cutting agents, and one thing at those stations, there aren't even hoses to wash down on a daily inspection on most of them. So we're getting hose bibs installed and 1-inch fire hoses there, and we got a free product to try for grease cutting.
Yeah.
So, and that's just in the trenches, getting things working better. And one of the things is they'd have that grease build up and call sewer viewer out there. And when you look at what it costs to have those stations cleaned, it's easier just to do them on a regular maintenance basis weekly while you're out there.
Fantastic.
And that's all I have. I'd happy to answer any questions.
Questions for,
Nope. I did have one other item. I'm sorry, I don't know how I overlooked it, but Mr. Jeff Kuntz of your local newspaper said he put in a request to the board for a stealth reader MIU, and he was certain that we could provide him with one. And I responded to him and said, well, they're $77 if you'd like to buy one, but since you made a request to the board for one, I would defer to the board if you had any problem with me selling them a stealth. And evidently he wrote an article and said he found an old original unit that they had used, and he wants to compare the Zenner unit to this other unit and break it apart. And I was like, and I told him, I said, I don't have cases of broken MIUs back there where it's been a huge problem. I go, we're looking into issues with them, but so I got about 30 bad ones sitting here, not a ton of them, but I didn't know if the board had any feeling one way or the other. To me, I think, what good can come out of it, go buy one from Zenner if you want one, and on the other hand, his local reporter, and if you could facilitate what he'd like.
Margaret?
No comment.
Tim? You're,
No.
no what?
No.
No, you're not,
No.
What? Just Dr. No?
We've got our own things. We don't need to get involved with investigations and et cetera. The answer is no.
So you don't, you're saying you do not want to sell Mr. Coons one of our MIs?
No.
How about if we do it for $100 and make some money?
Well, I guess the bigger question is.
Let me spell it for you, Chris.
I've got it, 2 letters, big capital N.
So, Chris, are we looking at what are we doing on our side to look at root cause for issues with the meters?
The Zenner team's scheduled to come back out the second week of this month, and they're going to bring 3 staffers with them, and they're going to look individually into a lot of these problems with their team and try to diagnose it, what they think the issue is.
So Zenner's going to look at their own products to
Correct.
see if any of their products are defective.
Correct. And they did their original audit, of course, came out, and we found out several of the units that were audited that they said there were no problems. There were problems on them. And I'm going to say that was more a function of the labor force they used, and the guys wanted to get so many units a day, and if they were short, they just checked them off.
Yeah, 'cause it sounds like there's I mean, with the amount of issues that we had, it's either mechanical or electronic, right? It's either the readers.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
I just had my finger up.
Are you?
So you know, I'm just curious, you know, I know that we're looking at doing some bench testing.
Right. We sent 5 meters out to a national testing firm
There you
last week, and we'll also send 5 more irrigation meters out.
But that's just mechanical, right?
Mechanical.
That's
And
not,
the- and the
that's
rest
not
of
looking
it-
at any of the readers.
Right.
So if benchmark comes back clear, no issues, then we would what?
Well, at that point, we're looking at Zenner to diagnose and whether it's a warranty issue or not. You know, with the equipment, how defective is it, and quantify the numbers. I mean, how many of them are bad? And is it just a signal that's bad? Is it the battery that's the cause of it? And they're gonna look at it in detail on those no-read issues that we have.
And they're planning on speaking to the board.
Oh, yeah, and they will be making a presentation to the board.
I'm not willing to let Mr. Neubauer make the decision on this MIU to Mr. Coons by himself.
Okay.
So, it doesn't seem to me there's any disadvantage to selling him one if we can, if we have extras that we can let him have one. And you're gonna get nothing but bad publicity if you try and keep him from having one. So I think we ought to let him have one for the price for $100 if he wants it.
Well, whatever cost is. Whatever
It's
cost.
$77 is our contract price.
When you do that, you're giving and providing a piece of material to somebody that doesn't have the expertise, and by doing that, you're essentially agreeing with that type of.
Well, what if Ed wanted one? What if Ed said he wanted to do independent testing?
In my opinion, what we're ending up with is somebody wanting to buy district property. We bought it, we own it, you know, statutory schemes for that. Typically, you don't dispose of property unless it's surplus property.
So it'd be better to redirect him to Zenner directly and have him purchase through the
Borderline.
manufacturer.
Correct.
Yeah. So maybe that's I mean, just give him whatever the SKU is for what we have and have him go directly to the manufacturer. I mean, we're not stopping him from doing research. If that's what he wants to do. Just like we can't stop a resident.
That's what he'll think.
Yeah.
That's what he's likely to think and likely to report, and I don't think there's anything to.
I mean, I'd love to figure out what, get to root cause.
Well, I think the district ultimately, I'm sorry, but we have the ability, if we wish to, if we're not comfortable with, it sounds like Mr. Banks is not comfortable with Zenner performing this analysis, to have someone performing on behalf of the district.
Correct.
I'm not.
The electronics, the transfer, all those issues.
That's what I thought you were
in
gonna
addition to the
suggest.
bench test.
Well, that's what, I would much rather us do an independent study. I mean, I don't know what Jeff's background is regarding testing, but, I think there is a valid case for us to do some independent testing around that. And I don't think we,
And I
at this
think we
point,
should go with,
would.
someone who has experience, who
I don't
is-
think, spending a couple extra dollars to thoroughly test those outside of
Yeah.
Zenner, who has, I would say there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there.
And we're holding monies.
Yeah,
correct?
I mean, we can take it out of.
Thank
yeah.
you very
Yeah.
much. So the cost for us to do it, I think, can easily be argued and justified that a professional service can check not only the mechanical, but also the reader, and you have a resource for that.
Oh, yeah, that's not, and that's
Having
one of the
said
reasons.
that, then the expense becomes a moot point. It becomes part of the monies that we're holding.
Yeah.
And that's
Now,
one of the
wait,
reasons
now,
I
hold-
sent
Hold
it.
on just one second, I wanna make sure I understand. Are we gonna tell Mr. Coons no? Is that what your decision?
I agree with providing him with the information on how he can obtain them directly from the company.
That information should be public, not just Mr. Coons. It ought to be on our website, and we feel it's that important.
Is it-
I don't even know if they sell directly.
Tell Coons how we can get one.
Directly as retail.
I think that if it's public information, I don't know if we should direct this information just to.
Let's just simply reply back, say, we appreciate you wanting to run point on this, but we've already determined we're gonna do it internally, and, our findings will.
And/or select a vendor that's knowledgeable.
Exactly.
In the field that Chris is aware of, that
Yeah.
can perform the requisite testing in addition to the bench testing.
Yeah.
Sure, that's one of the reasons I sent the meters out of state, I mean, basically to a national firm that we have no connection to. We've never done any work with them before, and so, just to take that appearance out of it. But sure, I'll look at, and get a couple vendors, and we can test that electric equipment independently.
Thank you.
Are you finished now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Supervisors' comments, Doug, you have anything?
No, I do, yes. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on Danny, because this is our last meeting before the election. So I just personally wanted to thank both Gary and Pam for their commitment and service to the board. And that's just on behalf of myself, so thank you very much.
Well, they're gonna be here on the 7th.
I know, but there'll be election prior to that, so who knows if, what'll happen, but I just want to say thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. We had our, Chris and April and myself had our second meeting with Joe DeServo. And what I wanted to do was have April pass out the results of the organizational chart functions, descriptions, and salary ranges. And this is actually information for you to bring back to the December 1st meeting, because that's when we'll actually be delving into this more. At the December 1st meeting, we'll go into all this information plus a timetable and financial data. And that's when I think that'd be the best time to do the review and discussion of the information.
December 1st?
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
That's it, I have nothing.
Gary?
We did it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to adjourn this meeting if there's nothing else. Anyone? We are adjourned.